Hello, hello, African Queen Mo family. How are you doing? It is the 13th of January 2025, and it is a Wednesday. And we are here. I'm going to be with my wonderful colleague Suzanne, who is always with us. And today we have a very interesting topic. It is about reverse migration. Now, you are welcome into the StreamYard, into the live session, into the live show. Please come and join us, especially if you have returned from abroad, from the abroad, or considering returning from the abroad, or if you are living in a Western country and planning to relocate. This is your show today. Okay. So, why did we decide to pick on this show? Well, I have had quite an interest in this because a lot of people who migrate, who leave their, countries, especially, for example, in Africa, in Asia, and they go to Canada or Europe or America or Australia, they go there with certain expectations. And I was one of those people. I went with the expectation of going to school and coming back. In those days, that was the expectation. But these days, most people expect to go to school and remain and get their papers together and remain in those countries, as because most people are really economic refugees. But what happens is that some people then decide that this is not for them. What they were expecting to experience in developed countries is not what they actually get. So, what's expected and what's the reality? Is very, very different. So today is that show. That's that show for you today. Please, guys, join us. Call your friends in, especially those people who are considering relocating back to Africa, relocating to Asia, to China, to wherever, to the Philippines. Yeah, if you're thinking of going back to India from Canada, let us know why. What are your reasons for that? And if you are already, maybe you're a native of America or Europe and you would like to move to a different country, can you tell us why? Why? Come into our studio and join us. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Looking forward to the discussion. Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing from you, Susan. You always cut to the chase, and we like that about you. And we know that today has been a long day for you, so we're going to try and not keep you on too long and hope that many people are going to participate. Yeah? All right. So, what is this reverse migration? What are some of the reasons that people are relocating back to poorer countries? Well, according to my research, or according to, let's not even talk about research, let's talk about my own experience. In my own experience, it was not even considered strange. It was actually the expectation that most people were not going to migrate for good, that most people were going out there to get something and come back. Go and either get education or maybe get a job, earn some money, come back, reinvest in your own country, and eventually come back home. So, you know, but now things are a bit different. Those were the days when there were jobs. There were still jobs available. Many countries had recently gotten their independence from colonial governments, so we were like the first or second generation, and so the jobs were there. There were, one could be employed in the civil service and the government. They were looking for trained and qualified people. And in fact, they were also sending people abroad to go and get training and qualifications abroad through scholarships, etc. And many people, in fact, were already working for the government or they had bonds. They were bonded back to their governments. And so they had to serve a certain number of years when they came back. It was a guarantee that you had to. If you were going to benefit from a government scholarship to go and study abroad, then you would be bound to come back and serve, usually about 3 to 5 years in your government. But now all of that has changed and most people are self-sponsored. Sponsorships are far and wide. They're not easy to find. And most people actually borrow money or, raise money through family events. We call them in this country Harambe. And people come together, communities come together, and they send one or two children in the community abroad to go to school, or they send you abroad to go and work. If you find a job, people will contribute your ticket. They will contribute a place for you to stay. They'll contribute enough money for you to be okay, maybe for at least 6 months to 1 year, which is what is required. And also they contribute money for you to go for your visa interview because it's usually quite expensive. So by the time people are going abroad, they are quite bonded already by the community, to remain there. This time, not to come back, but to remain there, make money, and come back. And make money and then send it back, and that money is usually reinvested in another person who is also sent out, or reinvested back in the family to build that family up. So we have seen a lot of YouTube creators online, many families on there, especially from Nigeria. They're very open about it. And they talk about, there's been so many YouTubers and creators inviting and encouraging people to travel abroad, to come to America, come to England, come to America, come to Canada, do your IELTS, IELTS, I think it is, qualifying exams, do your qualifying exams. This is what you're gonna, this is how you do it, this is where you go to, this is how you approach it, these are the agencies that are employing, this is how to apply. There's been a lot of that, but recently I've noticed that that seems to have died down a little bit, and mainly because the actual natives of the country are moving out. We are talking about 556,000 people were emigrating. These are 556,000 native British people leaving the UK in 2022. Think about it. That's like 500,000 people. They say it's insignificant, but what they know the numbers, and they know, like, many of those people, who are emigrating out, who are leaving the UK. Most of those people could either be from the European Union, actually, or from the UK, and many of them have spent about 4 years in the country before leaving. So most likely they just came as students and they're going back to their countries. These are usually EU people. But what they don't know is why. And what is so shocking is that there has been by 2022, there had been no long-term surveys, no large-scale, should I say, surveys conducted to find out why people are leaving the UK. What they know is the numbers. They can calculate based on the numbers and based on the number of years that you've been in the country, but what they don't know is the why. And this is the question that we want to answer here. Why are people trying to leave the UK? I think that, let me give you the link to. In fact, let me give you the link. I realize I haven't actually invited anyone here, which is unfortunate. Here is the link. You can come into our StreamYard and tell us about it. Give us your views. You can give us your views in the comment section, or you can come into the studio and let's talk. Susan, do you have any ideas why people have decided, to migrate back to their countries, or to migrate out of Western nations?
Yeah, I was listening to somebody who has done exactly that. But what he says is that it's a structured return back, looking to create an environment similar to that which he's enjoying in the foreign country, so that there's access to, like, infrastructural joys. Let me use the word joys, like um, power, running water, Wi-Fi and stuff like that. So that there's, to mitigate any changes. So some of the things he said struck him, and what made him really plan that he should return back to Kenya was the sense of belonging, the fact that Kenya is his home. That's where he was born. That's where his family is, and he feels a strong connection with his people here. Working in another country is fine, but that is not his home. So he was not so comfortable with that. The other thing is the cost of living in the West is really high. And, so people literally just live from, they're calling it a rat race. So people are operating on autopilot. You're spending as fast as you're making the money, or spending even faster than you're making the money. So it's a rat race. So you have no time at all to even relax or whatever it is. You have no time to rest because you're going from one job to the other. And so the cost of living is really high. And the same amount of money can do so much more when, brought to, say, Kenya. And then the other thing is societal and cultural ties. That sense of community was very important to this individual. So there's a support system that you get from your home, which you don't necessarily get in the West or the country you're migrating from, because it's not your home. So you don't have those links. So you want to be around family, you want to be around a community, and feel that supportive. It's actually mutually supportive because you support it as well. The other thing was the weather. The weather, the contrast for weather for Africans especially is that it's really, really cold in some seasons in the West. And, that really was something that meant a lot to this individual. And I imagine for many, the harsh weather conditions are really too harsh. And they probably move to areas like where it's warmer in the US and other parts of the world, like California, and then decide to stick there. But really, the weather was really a deciding factor. It was a bit too harsh for him. The other one is just safety, the security challenges. That although there are safety challenges here, when you reflect, they're not as bad as they are in, say, some of the areas where somebody who's even is a white collar job worker would find it difficult not to confront issues that are staring you in the face, uh, and which are serious security issues. Not a conducive environment, perhaps, uh, to raise your children. There are so many threats and so many vices that are right there, which you wouldn't find perhaps in a developing country or a third world country or a poorer country, like Kenya, and that you'd find in the West. So those things that would draw you away from a child, away from uh, a disciplined environment, are not there. So safety and security challenges. And the third one is the visionary idea that Africa is the future, that this is where everybody's looking to, including the West. So there's no harm in coming in advance, after, of course, having strategized well to return, and so that you're ahead of the game when the interest really peaks. So those were some of the ideas that I picked up. And the other thing is that some of the things this individual was talking about is the why they went to the West in the first place. And as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people from developing countries, or like Kenya, people went to the West to study. They went to learn. They went to learn to bring back information. Others went to learn and intend to stay there. But basically, it is to learn is the opportunity of even expanding your horizons and strengthening your networks. Of course, there was a lot of admiration in our country for the West. That's where there's development. That's where you can live a good life in inverted commas, a more pleasurable life, a more relaxed life, and that attraction is there for people from poorer countries. Then, of course, because um, it's like a very tense, you have to work really hard to keep up with your bills, and you're working like 9 to 5, holding several jobs, and all that. So there are serious health risks that come with it. You're not eating well, you're not exercising well, and we've talked about the importance of having managing mental health, using some of these skills of making sure that you have time to rest and all that. So they end up with the stress, and living an extremely stressful life, and because you're just running around living on autopilot. So he was saying that these are some of the that is a disadvantage. So the health risks, the disadvantage again of being overworked, not being able to focus and eat a proper diet or rest or anything like that, those are definite cons. The high cost, of course, is a difficult thing. And one question that was raised was the issue of, if you're clear about your objectives when you go to if you're clear about anything that you need to do, and anywhere you need to go for what you call it, um to what you're planning to do, and whether you're going to come back to Kenya or whether you're going to stay in the country that you have gone to study. Your objectives need to be very, very clear, and you have to think about how are you going to achieve this. and to think about it, well in advance. So these are some of the things that came across, that why people want to come back to their countries of origin, or countries where they were born, countries of their birth, or countries of their parents. And those that you notice that they're mostly like soft issues, you know, qualitative issues, about sense of belonging, community. I mean, and which are very, very, very strong. Yeah. So those are some of the things I came across. Um, and of course, there's this dichotomy in thinking, when you study the social media, where some are saying, well, come over, come over to the developed world, come and earn a living, and so you earn a lot of money and you send it back. So the argument of this group of people is that you can earn a lot of money and send it back, to um, make remittances and sort of like invest in Kenya, in buildings, in stuff like that. And we know that Kenya, for instance, and we're using it as a proxy because people are from different countries, which we would say are poorer nations than perhaps the Western nations. Um, you know, you people would, when they think about their investment and all that, it's something that is something that requires some thinking. And so these are some of the ideas that I was seeing floating there, and they're saying, oh, you send your money, you don't have to live in Kenya, but you can invest in Kenya, so you can continue to live elsewhere. And I think yeah, the strong draw, and one of the other things they raise as a reason why they would want to stay in the West and not come back was the infrastructure strengths. For instance, the healthcare system, the access to healthcare, which may not be as good as it is here in the developing world. Currently in Kenya, we have this real circus going on, with the new transition to a new system. And in fact, just today, the some patients stormed the CS's office, and they were really angry and said this thing is not working. It's causing us a lot of frustration, and we are in need of support. And as we discussed in the last show, the sufferers are the bulk of Kenyans, the majority of Kenyans, because these are Kenyans who need access to the level 2 and 3 hospitals, and yet they're receiving the least support. And so that's, it's a flawed design that needs to be restructured. Even when they're talking about it being for equity and all that, we have our analysis of it is that it is not an equitable, um, you know, uh, structure. So this whole SHA thing that they're bringing in is bringing some frustration. So those who want to stay in the West, and of course I saw a comment actually was that they're not happy with the current leadership, so they would rather stay stay where they are than come. And remember, we had a lot of Kenyans coming back during our third president's rule, when he was there, the late third president of the Republic, Mwai Kibaki. A lot of Kenyans came back because they were confident that our economy is going to thrive. So yeah, so those are just some of the ideas that I have. Over to you, Queen Mo.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Susan. Those are many, and I've actually written them all down for everybody. Come on, guys, join our show. I know it's rather late for the Kenyans who are here, but this show is for everybody. It's for those people who are living in the West, in America. We know that we have many of you guys in the US who are following us. We're waiting to, we hope that you're there, that you're going to join us. And some of you are in the UK, some of you are my friends, and you've told me that you want to return. You want to come back to Africa. You want to come back to Africa. What are your reasons for wanting to come back eventually? Okay. I will give you a little bit of a story about my life, okay, because I hope that Susan will also share a little bit. Because both of us went to school abroad and we both came back, yeah, back in the day. And we have had opportunities to go back out again and come back. I myself, after like about maybe 10 years or 20 years of living in Kenya, I actually went back and I went to work in the UK. And first of all, I came back the first time because I was a new mom. And at the same time, that was the plan. I went and I studied international development kind of studies. And I knew that I was actually going to come back and work in development field. to develop my own country. And fortunately, I did. I worked there, and then eventually, when I got married, my husband relocated to the UK, and I actually followed him there, literally. We went actually together to the UK. We decided to start a life in the UK because we thought it was going to be easier for us, for the two of us, because he was from a different African country. And so when we went to the UK, and we, relocated there, it was a completely different world compared to what I was used to. Or, for example, compared to my experience in the US, it was 100 times different. The UK is a completely different landscape. And that was one thing that I found really, really difficult, because all the, all the things that used to help me thrive in America didn't work. They actually helped me not to thrive in the UK. The UK is more of a conservative culture. Whereas, and it's a conservative culture and kind of socialistic, where there is this, it's seemingly an unwritten rule that you do not open your mouth and express any sort of enterprising spirit, enterprising individualistic spirit that is considered to be rude, and almost rude, and a bit, cocky, arrogant. Whereas in the US, that is exactly what is promoted. So when I went to the US, coming from Kenya initially, when I went to school, and because I was trained there, undergraduate, and then going to work there, I struggled to even express myself, to say who I was, what I was interested in. Public speaking was really difficult for us because we grew up in the British system, where we were taught to be, to kind of like be humble and quiet and meek. Is that the right word? And then you go to America and they look at you like you're the dumbest person in the world. Who is this person who can't even express themselves? What's wrong with you? Well, they expect you to speak up. And so when I went there, I learned public speaking, and it really helped me by articulating what who I was. I actually developed into that person. And it really helped me to come out of my shell. I saw the same thing happen when I took my son to the US, when he also went to the university in the US. He found it really difficult to do public speaking, that's one of the subjects, but it also helped him to come out of his shell and to learn to express himself. He was more of a quietish person. And I was a never quiet person ever, but I still found it difficult to articulate myself, and to project myself as me in the US. And then once I got the hang of it, oh my goodness, I took it and I ran with it. And I did business in the US, and I had a really good time, and I enjoyed it. I had good jobs, and I was working at the university. I also had a part-time business where I was selling African crafts, and I was doing really well because of my big mouth, and because I love things to do with jewelry and things. I was selling them and making a killing on the side. And actually, I quit my university job to go and do that part time because I was a mom. And so I only had to work 4 days a week. So I learned to be an entrepreneur on my own as a single mom in America. And that made me a very strong person. And what happened is that when I came back to Kenya, because of course, at the end of my education, the plan was to come back. And it was going to be easier for me anyway. I decided not to stay, even if I got a job offer. I did get a job offer with the university to remain behind and get a green card. I made a choice to come back to Kenya because I had a child. And I found it a bit difficult to raise my son by myself. I wasn't used to that because, you see, in Africa, we have community, we have family. I grew up with my father and my mother. So I grew up in a family setting. So it was very difficult. A family setting meaning mother and father and grandfather and, aunties and uncles. So it was a bit difficult for me to balance. I was having a difficult time trying to figure out how to balance. So when I got the opportunity to come back to Kenya, I came to attend my brother's wedding. And then for some reason, I wasn't able to go back immediately. I just decided, let me just take it up. And I got a job with an NGO. And there I was. I started my international development career. And I remained, and then I stayed for like about a year and a half, and then I went back for my master's to the US. And then I came back again because my son was here. Actually, he came, joined me in the US for a little while. Then we came back when he was about 7 years old to Kenya. And I remained in Kenya until from the time that my son was 7 years old, and he went to the university when he was 19. He went now to the US to university. Hi, Fia. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. And went back to the university. No, he went to the university, and then I got married later. And then I joined my husband in the UK. In fact, I went ahead of him, and then he came, and then he went to Wales. And so this is my life. This is I'm telling you my life history. But even when I went back to Wales, because I had the experience already now of being inducted into the Kenyan life, I was now a Kenyan working in Kenya. Okay. First of all, I had to first of all come down from my mountain of pride. Okay. Having come from school in America, I had to come now and integrate into the Kenyan system. And it was very difficult at first because the majority of people at that time had not studied in the US. Most of them were graduates from the UK, and they tended to look down on anybody who had studied from any other country apart from the UK. If you had not gone to the UK to school, it's like you had not graduated, and your graduation or your education was of lower value or lower class. Until, of course, I proved them wrong. And many of us proved them completely wrong. Because, in fact, our education system required us to we had a 4-year undergraduate degree. Whereas in the UK, I believe it was only 3 years, it was very difficult. The US was tough. It was not a joke. And there was a lot of also work. You had to work also before you graduate. You had to work in your field before you could graduate, at least in my day. So it was tough. I'm not saying that, the British, like Susan is a graduate from the UK, I'm a graduate from the US. All of us are great. But what I'm saying is that it was difficult to integrate. So when I integrated and came back, then I started working in the international circles. Then from there, got actually a job in the UK in international circles. Came back to Kenya, got married, went back to the US. No, went back to the UK, got another job in international circles with international NGOs. But I'll tell you what, the work culture in the UK is so different from the work culture in the US. Very, very different. And I found it very difficult to integrate because already the UK has many people in the UK tend to look down on the British, on the Americans. If you speak with an American accent like the way I do, a little bit, if they can tell that you're not 100% British, you didn't go to their British universities, or that haven't come directly from Africa, you have a tendency towards the US, then they will also dumb you down. They would assume that you're not as smart as they are. Okay, which is very difficult, especially when you're coming from a country like the US. In fact, if you go online, you will find a lot of people, especially Americans, praising the UK, the ones who are living in the UK, praising the UK, but at the same time also talking about the discrimination that they experience. Even white people, it's not just about being black. It's anybody who has studied or who has come from America. There is this long-standing underlying, undercurrent, which is not positive in the UK. And I used to find it very backward. And the second thing I found about the UK was that the wages are very, very low. The contracts are also not assured. So when you're working, every single day you go to work, you're not actually reassured that you'll keep your job. Every day you're concerned, you're worried about keeping your job, which was very different back in the day, not now, but back in the day, that was quite different because in the US, if you got a job like with the University of Minnesota or like where I was working at the university, or if you're working with, let's say, with government, or you're working with the banking sector or anywhere, in fact, what Americans tend to do is to try to reassure you of your job. They try to reassure you that you will keep your job, that you will have your job for a long time. And the people that I graduated with, all of them have got jobs. Some of them working as professors, University of California. Others are working for the government in the US, in different government departments. And they've been there and they're retiring now. Okay, they're going to be retiring maybe in the next 5 years to 10 years, they'll be retiring. So they've kept the same jobs in America, but in the UK, it's a completely different thing. So I also found that in the UK, the bosses were not as, overall, the bosses, some of them were not as friendly as, for example, in America. In America, the bosses most of them are very approachable. I felt that they were much more approachable compared to the UK. But even when I was in the US, I also found that there was the big R. You know the big R? That is everywhere. That is in the UK, that is in the US. So I used to feel that that was too much of a burden for me to be carrying around, you know? Until today, I still feel the same way. So I have written letters of resignation and said, no, I'm not going to work like this. I'm going to be self employed and I'm going to start my own company and I'm going to do my own thing. And I'm not going to be subjected to people's opinions about, which are based on I don't know what, baselessness. So I started my own company, and that's how I met Susan, and we started working together, And even she also started her own. I guess she'll also tell us about hers. And it's been an up and down. It's not easy, but it still gives you that freedom. You have that freedom when you have your own company, when you have your own thing going, because you can, invent yourself. You can find your niche. You can also grow based on your inputs, should I say your sacrifice. You can decide to get up. I used to get up in the morning at 5 and be in the office at 6, in my own office. Yeah, that was me. I mean, I was so disciplined. I would write 100 applications for jobs. Every single day I would write applications. That was just me. I would bid on contracts every single day. Ask Susan, you know, that was me, very, very motivated for a very, very, very long time. Yeah. Until it wasn't necessary anymore because I had no child to educate, got married, got other priorities, other kids. But you see, what I'm saying is that when you have your own thing going, you can actually develop it when you come to Africa. Like when you go back to Africa, I felt like I had that space more here in Africa. But in the UK and in the US, it's a different terrain. It's a very different terrain, but still doable, but it's quite different. Susan, you want to say anything? Tell us about your experience over there. A little bit about your experience. Like, why did you come back to Kenya? Why? Why did you
Okay.
stay back there in those countries, in the abroad?
Um, okay, I was very clear. Um, even before I went to university in the UK, I went to Wales, I studied law there, my Bachelor of Law degree, um, University of Aberystwyth, Wales, and I was very clear about why I was going. I knew I was going to study there and come back home. And as Queen Mo said, that was the thinking of the people who were going to university at that time. We were not going there to stay. We were going there to learn. We were going to come back and help to build our nation, contribute as good citizens of our nation. So that was very clear in my mind. You know, and one thing I noticed that even when we were doing the interviews and stuff like that, for visa or whatever, um, they would want to know whether we had any intention. I had any intention of, staying in the UK, and I was very quick to say no. I'm going home after I finish my degree. Um, and I know other people who gave different answers were not treated the same way that I was, because it was clear to them that I had pride, I had national pride, and that I was very clear that I knew what I wanted, and I was not going to stay and maybe take take somebody else's job or whatever it is that made them hostile. But one thing I did notice is that they viewed me differently because of that I was not coming there. I was coming there for a purpose, and I intended to go back. So that was, very clear to me. Even when we talk about children's rights or basic rights, we talk about name and nationality, and that was like we're talking about a sense of belonging. It was very clear to me where I belonged. um, in the course of my career, I've actually traveled to other countries to work, as Queen Moa said. But it's always been very clear to me that I'm just there for a purpose, and I'm coming back to my nation. Um, yeah, so the some of these things would just make you think about, okay, uh, even when I was there, some of the battles again that because of the time when I was there, um, we were facing more than one hurdle. Because first of all, you're female, and I was in a highly male dominated profession. So mostly there were more males than females and stuff like that. So we had to work twice as hard as the ladies in the class. Sometimes, we had to work twice as hard, and even when you did really, really well, better than say the males, they couldn't quite believe that you had, because sometimes the lecturers say go look for so and so and read an essay or something like that. So anyway, I my experience overseas in the UK was really great. I did learn a lot. I did enjoy my learning. I made some really wonderful friends. They came and visited with me here, and stuff like that. And that's something I would say. Yes, definitely the opportunities was there, and I was lucky to have it. So for me, a lot of these things, like the sense of community, the home, that is really important. And um, as a lawyer, one of my areas of study was children's rights and family law. And some of the things that came my way was also people wanting to move to other countries. And one area of concern for me was when um, people want to move to countries and their spouse is sort of abusive. And so I would, in my discussions with them, say, perhaps you want to think about this because you don't have a support system. If you go to another country with this person, are you going to be at risk? As opposed to if you stay at home in you say Kenya and somebody's abusive, you have your support system, your community is there, your family is there to really support you in that. So some of these things would occur to me, and I would sometimes share this with some of um, my clients, and they would think again about whether or not they felt it was safe to travel with somebody who was abusing them here. So if they were abusing them here, it would be probably much worse out of the country. And we've actually in this program, um, not today's program in it, but in previous shows, talked about the fate of some Kenyans who have gone. They were in an abusive marriage here, and then they went overseas, and they're not coming home alive, or they didn't come back home alive because the support system was not really there. And so they didn't have somewhere to flee to or to go to. In fact, as recent, there's a recent case where this lady is also unalived. You know, same thing, just, the violence starts in one place, you move to another place, it just continues. So when I'm talking about community and some of the things that would draw you back to your home, is that safe of security, that safe of that point of safety, and you understand the systems better, and you know that perhaps the hurdles you'll have to deal with at home are different from the hurdles you may have to deal with in a foreign country. Uh, you know, maybe the hurdles in a foreign country be twice more, two times more than the ones you're dealing with here. So the prejudice perhaps of you're a female and say you're reporting something like abuse. I know in the UK, for instance, they have changed the laws a lot, and they have learned a lot about domestic violence. Um, so their response is different. But at that time, say it was the time when I was in university, the response was not good. And it was not good the whole world over. And you go and report something. So you're dealing with the problem of, first of all, you're female, nobody believes you. Second, you're not a citizen of the country, so you're not really being treated in the same way. So there was a whole line of things. So for me, coming back home was the way to go. And the adventure, of course, is to find ways to be innovative and to thrive in this environment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Very
the other
interesting,
thing that
Susan.
another thing, of course, they wanted, like the university I went to, and others, they wanted foreign students because we were paying like three times more than the local students. Um, so they wanted the foreign students. So we were quite a big cluster from different countries all over the world. And I remember this um, he was in a different faculty and came as a mature student, but his wife was underage. But according to his customs and traditions, she was not. She was his wife. But of course, what happened is the British government were not going to tolerate that, and they separated him from his wife. From he
Oh,
was
yeah.
Pakistani, yeah, and they were, that's what they did. So there was it's a bit of a cultural shock. I remember that response from them. Of course, for me, I sympathize with the fact that the girl was indeed underage, and she shouldn't be married in the first place. But because of their culture, they were doing it. And so this man was actually told, either we deport you, if you want to study, you cannot stay with this lady, she's underage. She cannot be your wife, we're not accepting that status. So if you want to study, you stay differently, or we deport you. So he wanted to study, so he and his wife were separated. I don't know what happened, because I left them there and came back to Kenya. Yeah. Muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Yeah. Susan, thank you so much for raising that issue of one of the challenges of one of the reasons why people migrate back home is because of separation, isolation from their families. These are some of the shocking reasons that so many people relocate back to their countries, which are considered poorer than where they are in the West. If they're not able to take their families along, they will reverse migrate. Like I'll also give an example, a very, very shocking example, a very sad example, actually. There was a university student when I was in the US, who unfortunately he located to the US. He was located from one of the African countries. I won't mention which one because I don't want anyone to identify the man. But he ended up coming from one of the southern African countries, and he joined us as an international student in our university, and he left his wife and 3 children. Okay. And then after staying for about a year, he started to work very hard so that he can start working on getting tickets and visas for his children and wife. By the time he was relocating his wife and children, the wife had already gotten into a relationship with another man in his country and had a child and contracted HIV. So by the time that he was actually bringing the wife into the country, he was bringing in a woman who was ill, and she had lost her baby, by the way. She had lost that child with HIV. And what was amazing is that he even knew, I don't know whether he knew about it, but I know that I was part of, me and my friends were part of the people who were helping that family a lot. His children, the children that he had had with the woman initially were HIV free, but he ended, because of the fact that the family was separated for such a long time. I think it was even much, much longer than, because he was doing his PhD actually. Yeah. So I think they'd been separated for at least 5 years. It meant that the woman had now started to develop a relationship with someone else, had a child. So you see the way it interferes and breaks families. Yeah. And this is really, really bad. The visa rules and the immigration rules can be very detrimental. And so many people actually just go back. Even if they're offered good jobs or they're offered university placements to continue maybe with another degree, they decide to go back because of their families. If they're not able to move with their families to the country, they will reverse migrate. Again, the cost of renewing visas can also be so high and make it difficult for people to actually stay legally even after they graduate. And this is why I really like President Trump's idea that what he has said is that he's going to introduce something in the US. He's going to introduce a new benefit to students who study in the US. If you take on a 4-year degree, he says that if you take on a 4-year degree in the US as a foreign student, then you will automatically qualify for a green card to remain and work in the country. And this is what's amazing, that you'll find that, which would be a really wonderful thing. A really wonderful thing, because before that, actually, either you had to be lucky and get a job that will sponsor you to remain, or you'd have to go back to your country and reapply for a job and then come back, with a green card. But what Trump is trying to do is that he's trying to reduce the number of illegal migrants in the country and try to retain those who are trained in the system. Because, of course, they have an aging population and they do need people who are young and agile and educated. So, unlike us in Africa, who are taking our educated, bright, and smart people and taking them to the Middle East to work as slaves, actually, Donald Trump is looking to see how he can retain people. So, what I can tell anybody who wants to go to university, this is your time to apply to university in America if you want to remain there and work there, if you want to. you know. But these are some of the reasons, shocking reasons why people relocate to poor countries. Again, let's talk about the Americans themselves who are deciding to relocate back, to actually migrate out of America and Europe and go to live in Asian countries. Why are they doing that? Many of them, these they call themselves, they're not really passport bros. Some of them consider to be passport bros, others are not. But many of them is because they say that they're looking for a wife, especially men. And women, by the way. They're also looking for the men, they're looking for partners. For women, they're looking for security and safety for their children, because in many of these countries the stand, like Susan mentioned, there's been a lot of mass eliminations of humans, like in the gun culture in the US, the knife culture, knife crime in the UK. All of that is causing jitters amongst anybody who has a child, especially migrants who have children. So many of them are moving back to their countries, or they're moving to poorer countries. I also saw in a TikTok video a man, actually a white American man, say that he's moving to Tanzania. Did you see that video, Susan? Oh my God. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to download these videos today, guys. But this gentleman was saying that he's moving to Tanzania, and he was being interviewed, and he was asked, "Why are you moving to Tanzania?" And he said, "Because I am tired of the white people in America." He's like, and then he was so, "Oh, by the way, look at yourself, you're white." So he says, "Yes, I know." And he says, "Don't you think you're going to contaminate the country with your whiteness?" She was being sarcastic, the journalist. "Don't you think you're going to contaminate the country?" He says, "No, I won't. I won't, because I'll be quiet. I will just watch and observe. And if anybody needs any input from me, I will gladly give it. But I will not contribute. I will not insist on, like he won't bulldoze himself, and he will not carry the negativity that he sees from his people, his brothers and sisters at home." So it's so interesting. There are many people who are actually fleeing, people who are, non black, who are fleeing to mostly black nations, okay, mostly non white nations, basically to find peace. To find peace. Because one of the things he said about Tanzania, he said that people in Tanzania are very welcoming. They welcome him, and he feels safe and happy and comfortable. And so he's not planning to go anywhere else. He's going to Tanzania first because he feels like, he wants to stay away from white culture. Can you believe this? I mean, what I saw on TikTok. Again, another thing is that some people, by the way, I also saw that there are some white women, not even white women, some American women who are moving to other countries like Spain. Why? Because of what they see as oppressive laws against their reproductive rights. Like America under Donald Trump, they feel that they may lose their reproductive rights, their rights to choose whether or not to have children, to choose whether or not, that kind of thing. So many of these, and others are even moving because they don't have access to certain social media platforms like TikTok. Would you believe it? There's some people right now, that's a really
Okay.
shocking reason why some people feel like, a country like the US is becoming dogmatic and becoming too what, too strict. Is that the word? I don't think that's the
Yeah.
right word. Yeah. And so they feel like they're losing their freedoms, so they want to move. They want to move to countries like, even somewhere in the global south where they will feel free. A lot of the passport bros are moving to Thailand to get Thai wives. Apparently they're supposed to be very submissive women, and and all that, and they help those men to feel masculine. I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah.
Let them not try
We
that in
should
case.
be concerned about that. We should be concerned about that.
Yeah,
You know, yeah, we should be concerned about that. In fact, when you're talking about people, the guys who are going to look for wives out of their home country, on the face of it, there's no problem with that. You can want to be, maybe they're attractive to Asian women or whatever it is. But when you listen to the underlying reasons, you realize it's rooted in misogyny to some extent, because you're talking about a woman being submissive. I mean, you want literally like a slave. That's what it is, because you know that you're not looking forward to an you know and a relationship with another adult. You want a relationship with somebody who will pander to your whims and do your every wish and stuff like that, which is not normal in healthy marriages or healthy relationships. There's a lot of give and take, and it's accepted and that sort of mutual respect. But they're not looking forward to a mutually respectable uh, relationship. They're looking to one where they're king and lord of all, and somebody is just a slave to do somebody's bidding to keep them satisfied. Their wants and needs are completely unimportant. If they want to go to school, no, and you find it's likely that they will not even be allowed to self-improve, you know. And those are some of the things that are important to young people today: to self-improve, to keep studying, to keep improving, to keep learning new things, and that's their culture. So I feel sad for when I hear males talking that way, that they want a doormat, literally. Um, there's nothing adult about that relationship, and it's unlikely to last very long, in my view.
Yeah, one of the things that we have to realize is that there's a lot of people, like we mentioned before, I believe on the Sunday show, that there's a significant group of people who have mental health issues, you know, and some of their mental health issues are things to do with narcissism, you know. These narcissistic personalities are also traveling around, looking for supply. They're looking for people who are going to pay attention to them, and keep boosting their egos, their fragile egos. So definitely, narcissism is one of the reasons. Narcissism is probably one of the big factors that you will find there. So one has to be careful. Yeah. So these are the kinds of, and in Nigeria, reverse migration is known as jakpata. There's japa. Japa means to migrate. Japada is to come back, yeah, from the country that you've been. And now there's a lot of Nigerians, for the first time I've actually seen. And it's significant because there's quite a number. The majority, I believe, of Africans who are living abroad or traveled abroad are Nigerians. So, and they have been doing this for many years. So it's quite interesting to see a lot of Nigerians actually decide to go back to Nigeria. Yeah, there are many who are leaving. They're leaving Canada, they're leaving America. And the reason why they're saying, the main of the reasons is because of especially child raising their kids. It's difficult for them to raise their kids abroad. It's very expensive to raise children abroad, And so that's one of the things, like you're talking about, that lack of community and support system. The other thing is that low wages, because many Nigerians really work really hard, and many of them are working in the health sector, majority of them. They work really hard, they work many hours. So what happens is that you see a breakdown in their families. They're complaining a lot. A lot of Nigerian, if you go online, you'll find a lot of Nigerians talking about the health or the lack of health of the family, the Nigerian family living abroad. A lot of broken families. Why? Because of the system that encourages benefits to single parent households, and also the fact that many women who, when they go to many Nigerian women, when they go abroad, okay, they kind of find their freedom and they decide they enjoy it, they like it, and they realize that they can work and make money, and they're no longer dependent on their husbands for money. And so this is specifically unique, I think, to Nigerians. I think because in Nigeria, I think in Kenya is no big deal because women have always worked. Women are used to working alongside men and they expect that. But I think in Nigeria, men are expected to be the providers mostly overall of the household. And I think when the women go abroad, they find that they can also work and also get benefits and also have children and have access and keep the children. So all of that, the changing family dynamics, are why the reason why people would rather relocate. So all I can say is that I think we're going to wind up because I know Susan has had a very long day. But what I want to say to people is your decision to migrate or to reverse migrate, to go back to your country or to go to a poorer country should be thought through very carefully because like Susan said, it's not been smooth sailing for either one of us, either Susan or myself, because one of the risks of moving back we can share with you is number one, inadequate opportunities for work. Yeah, because we're still growing economies. Poorer countries are growing economies. They still don't have the absorption capacity to absorb every educated person. So Those opportunities are limited. Secondly, there's also cash flow issues and access to credit. Access to credit is difficult in developing countries, and therefore, if you're business minded and you want access to money to do business, it's actually very difficult. The third thing is that you have a very high, should we call it, burden. Majority of people have a large family behind them. Okay, so the burden of the family is very large, and the expectations are very high, and therefore they'll be always looking up to you to provide advice, to provide money, to provide support, and therefore it can be quite a drain on you emotionally and also physically and also financially. A lot of people feel that way. Those are the risks of moving back home. Okay, when it comes to money, access to credit, access to job opportunities, and the burden of the family responsibility, which is really large. Okay, and like Susan was also talking about, that the services that are available in poorer countries are limited by inexperienced people and corruption. The justice system may not be as efficient in poorer countries, and therefore your ability to get access to justice, for if you have been wronged, you might find that people might, find backhand ways to get justice. Those people, I mean, to delay justice or to deny you justice. And so this is one of the reasons why many companies are actually closing down in poorer countries. But some of the advantages of being in these poorer countries also outweigh those risks,
Mm,
because, for example, what can you can't put a price on family, on community. You really can't, you can't quantify that experience that I have with Susan, that experience, who are my family friends for years, that experience that I have, let's say, with my friends, with my family. You can't put a quantify around that. Really cannot. Okay. The other thing is just being amongst your own people, feeling of belonging. It's almost that you can't put a quantifier on that. Good weather. Okay, most of these countries in the south are blessed with good weather, sunny days, good quality food. And that's a big one. There's some people who are moving away from the West, which is a shocking reason, because of the bad quality food. They say that they're actually sick from the food. When they eat the food, because a lot of it is GMOs and it's not fresh, they're getting sick in the West.
mm,
Yeah. High crime rate. The kind of crime that you find in the southern countries, in the poorer countries, is usually not gun related, not gun crime, not knife crime. The kind of crime that you find are things like maybe robbery, armed robberies, and there are few that you can take measures. There are measures that you can take to avoid that, and places you can avoid living in certain spaces and certain places. So there are many advantages to being in the West and in the poorer countries, and the biggest one is actually freedom. Your freedom. I don't know how you can quantify freedom, because again, the bureaucracy of the Western nations is huge. There's a lot of bureaucracy there. Everything is highly taxed, very highly monitored, closely monitored, and very
mm.
expensive. And those are the things
Yeah,
that make the quality of life in the West, not desirable at all for someone like me. And as you get older, you really need that community, the sense of community, sense of freedom, sense of ownership, being able to own your property without worrying that it's going to be taken away from you when you grow old. Truly owning your own home. When you have a home, it's yours. Nobody's coming to
yeah.
sell it to put you in a nursing home, for example.
I
Isn't
know
that true,
that's
Susan?
terrifying. That's
It's
terrifying.
terrifying. A lot of people actually move back because they don't want to end up in a nursing home. They don't. Yeah, they want to.
That's
They'll rather pay anybody anything to look after them when they're older. Fear is saying something. Also, people have high expectations and want to achieve so much in a short space of time. That is true. A
yeah,
lot of people
yeah.
who come are disappointed because they expect that they can achieve so much. you
Mm-hmm.
know both, it's both ways of fear. Like, if you're coming back to Africa or coming back to the poorer country, you have to give yourself time, okay, to achieve. You need to give yourself time. And the same, because everything
Yeah,
is much slower. The wheels turn
yeah,
much slower here, and it's really frustrating. Yeah. But the same thing also, when you go abroad, they say that it takes almost 10 years to settle in a country like the UK. It can take
yeah,
you up to 10 good years of your life to feel settled, finally settled. Yeah,
yeah. I
it
think
really can
one of the
take
challenges,
years. And
yeah,
and Fia is saying the
yeah,
same thing. It takes years to settle down, you know?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's difficult to say. But I was listening to a young man who was saying,
Yeah.
was answering the question that why do some people go to, the West, to the developed countries, to the rich nations, and come back home with nothing? And his response was, you need to understand the lifestyle. Um, they're living hand to mouth. They're probably doing several jobs, just trying to keep their heads above water. There's so many bills to pay. Life is so expensive, so it's difficult for them really to accumulate wealth. And even if they can, it's just in bits and pieces. So the truth of the matter is that the quality of your life in the West also depends on the type of job you're going to do. So for instance, if you're going in there as a professor, you know in university, or you're going into to the West, you're going to the US to work in for World Bank or one of these big institutions where your salary is really high, top notch and stuff like that. The quality of your life and your experience about living in the West will be very different from somebody else who's coming in from a different point of view. We've seen, of course, there are stories of a lot of Kenyans who have gone and really been able to establish themselves and thrive in the West. But there are also those really sad stories of those people who have a completely different experience. They have lived in cars. They've, this hand to mouth. They've slept in their cars. They can't sleep in their home, and that's even more terrifying because of the weather. So one of the things that we need to bear in mind, if somebody decides that they want to come back uh, to Kenya or their home nation, which is a poorer nation, is really to strategize well, to have a plan, and to have a proper exit plan from where you're coming from. One, like I mentioned earlier, is to make sure all those mitigating factors are addressed. That the lifestyle, supposing you're coming back with your wife, you now have a wife and you have children, all those factors that they have experienced on that side, they'll find them in their home. The other thing again is patience, and to do what you can when you can. In other words, with your resources, you know, um, build, build your home in layers. Some people have actually opted to go to their rural homes where they grew up, and this is not in the cities, but that's where they want to be because that's where their family is, and their experience. That is where they're happiest, and that's where their children are happiest, and that's where they're happiest. So one of the things, of course, is to plan. So if you're building a house, you can do it in stages over a long period of time, so you shouldn't be in such a rush. But I think the joy will remain in you, because you know that you're eventually coming home. And I know a lot of my colleagues and friends who do live out in other countries. Many of them have those plans. They're going step by step, and they're planning. They're consolidating their interests here in Kenya, and they plan to move and actually retire here. you know so their plan is to actually to come home, because this is where they have a sense of community and stuff. You can really tell a lot about that, because they will reach out to you and they'll look for you whenever they're in country. Your friends, they'll deliberately look for friends, deliberately look for family, because that sense of longing. And in fact, I keep saying I really admire the way whenever you're around, you look for your friends. You look for your friends, you call them up, and you meet them. And it's because of that sense of belonging that is so important in our persona as people. So do it step by step, plan well, uh, don't rush it, have a good strategy, and come home. It's always best. I mean, this is where, one of the lines of dignity is you have a name and a nationality. I know some people have dual nationality. Some Kenyans are now actually Americans completely, or some are both. They are Kenyans and Americans, and that's okay. But that is your nationality, and that's what you do. That's what it says on paper. The question at the end of the day is, where do you really truly feel that you belong? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the difficulty that many people have is their children. Because they believe that, a lot of people really do believe that the West is a better place for their children, or their children are happier there, or they can afford to put them in good schools in those countries. And so many of them are delaying their return because of their kids. Their children need to finish their education. But what happens is that when the children complete their education in those countries, I have seen firsthand where those kids have no belonging in the country where you belong. And now it's a split between you as a parent and the child, because you don't want to be far from your kids, but at the same time, you don't want to be far from your people. It's a very painful place, and a decision that one has to take is a very difficult decision to take. In some cases, you'll find the parents have come back and left the children there to continue their lives in those Western nations. In some cases, you find that the parents have come back with the kids and they've adjusted properly. And in some cases, you also find that the parents have actually brought the children early so that they start integrating before they actually move once and for all. Yeah, and so I think there's no formula. I think the most important thing is just to look at your own family and make a decision that is good for all of you, knowing that your life is still your own, and your children are going to grow up and they're going to have their own lives. I think that's very important to know that even if in the end you eventually be split up with your kids, as long as you see them often enough, you know that they're going to end up having their own lives anyway. You don't want to have an enmeshed situationship with your children. You need to leave them and let them go. Yeah. Okay, so guys, so thank you very much. It's been lovely chatting with you. We had Fia in the live show today, and we saw there's somebody else in there who's not saying anything, but we know you're there, and we want to welcome you and thank you for being part of our live show. For those of you who are going to be joining the show, maybe watch it later after the show is over. Thank you so much for your time, and let's see you next time on Friday, where we will be talking relationships, your favorite subject. Yup. So let us hear your comments about, relocating or moving abroad or moving back home. And if anybody is interested in coming back to Kenya, Susan and I are available to help you in any way possible. I myself personally am very interested in working with people who are interested in emigrating back to Kenya. Yeah, if you're interested in coming back to Kenya, or if you're interested in leaving Kenya and going either to the UK or the US, feel free to contact me. I'm available. Just go into my DM and contact me specifically. I believe I'd be a good resource for you, just for advice, maybe, or even just support. Not financial support, but I can give advice. That might be useful, and I think Susan can as well. I still stop laughing. It's true. It's true. We could give advice. You and I could give a lot
Yeah,
of advice. Yeah. And
yeah, we
Susan is
can
a
give
wonderful
advice on this.
trainer. And I know you would love to hear from us, because I know there's a lot. Because it's not just from us, but it's also from the people who we know, who have traveled or who have returned. And there are very many of them. Yeah.
Mm,
All right.
yeah.
Bye, guys. Bye. Have a good evening. And thank you so much for your time. God bless you. Take care. To-dos from Susan and I. It's good night and good day. Bye bye.
Bye.